Okay. Mickey Speedway USA, everybody. The Redux. I've never done this before. Excuse me. I reviewed this game in like October, and I think I did an alright job in doing so, but I have since learned that I had no idea what the fuck I was talking about, really. I mean, whatever I talked about in that video was my initial impression. Okay, so let's fucking break this down. The game is insane. It's the best kart racer on the system, hands down. Like, far and away, like a million times better than Diddy Kong Racing, in my not so humble opinion. Definitely better than Mario Kart as far as just like a single player racing game goes. You know, Mario Kart obviously is the choice if you're fucking doing multiplayer. Superintendent, everybody out there in the hallway. I don't know what the fuck he's doing. He was just over here. He just fixed my sink. My fucking sink broke this week. I was like doing dishes or something, and I turned the light off, and I'm walking to sit down, and I hear the unmistakable sound of water gushing out of a fucking hole that it shouldn't be gushing out of. You know, and I tear open the cabinet beneath the sink, and sure enough, I'm fucking water. I'm like, yeah, Jesus Christ, son of a bitch, what the fuck? You know, just water everywhere, and so I've been doing dishes in the bathtub ever since. So now there's specks of yellow rice and fucking black beans all over the tub. It's disgusting. It's fucking disgusting. I'm so thrilled that I don't have to deal with that anymore. He fixed the sink. I made the coffee. We were a hell of a team this morning. Okay, so Mickey Speedway USA. Let's get down to fucking brass tacks here. Let me pick up where I left off in the other video. In the other video, I had like beaten the game. I hadn't even beaten the fucking game yet. That's how cocksure I was of my fucking stupid ass opinion regarding it. I had played most of the game, but what I didn't realize is that like the game starts once you hit the last. I don't know, like the last 4 levels, we'll say, the last Grand Prix or whatever you would refer to it as. Like, up until the last couple levels, the game is pretty fucking lax. You know, you play the maps like maybe 3 times, and then you finally get first place, and that's sort of it, you know. And I was like, oh, this is fun. This is like an easygoing, nice sort of game to play and pick up and whatever. And then I got to the last 4 levels or whatever. And I was like, I don't know if I can beat this game. Like, this might actually kind of, like, sort of be impossible, right? Because they're really fucking difficult. You know, you got Colorado, which is, like, one of these levels where there's no barriers on either side of the map for the most part. And so, like, the first 20 fucking times I played the level, it was every time I was falling off the side without fail. Because at this point, the game turns into something that you really have to begin, like, finessing. You know, you have to actually learn these maps and you know, at what angle you got to cut a turn and when you have to sort of this and that, whatever. Okay. And so I started, like, getting a little bit frustrated. I'm like, I can't fucking beat these levels. Like, these are really tough levels. And so one day, I sat on the couch, on the phone, right? I was taking a phone call, and I was just sort of like mindlessly learning the map, you know? Like every time I didn't give a shit, right? Like I sort of like turned off, because if I was paying attention, I would have lost my fucking mind with the amount of times I lost. And so I had to like get into the zone a little bit where I wasn't really thinking about the game. I was just like reflexively reacting and learning and whatever. Like, what am I trying to say? This is sort of an interesting lesson to be learned about this, and then like about anything, like drawing, painting, what have you, shit you do with your hands. There's a lot to be learned out of just like mindlessly sort of automatically doing it below the threshold of like consciousness, right? Where you're just kind of, it's like knitting, you know, like when my mom knits and watches TV or something. Like that's the point you got to get at with this game. And with other kind of shit in general. Like, it doesn't have to just be pigeonholed to fucking Mickey Speedway USA, everybody. And so I was on the phone, and finally I, like, got through the map. Like, I understood the map, and I'm like, oh, wow. That was, like, really difficult, but I came out the other end of it like, wow, I am like so much better at this game now. What I'm trying to say is that like the game opens up once you actually like beat one of these difficult maps, because these difficult maps are impossible to get first place on just straight up driving. You know, you have to like learn how to drift for one thing. You know, I know that all these kart racers, like, people are like, well, you know, drifting support, you gotta know how to drift. You really fucking don't. All right, like, drifting in Diddy Kong Racing is optional. You don't have to know how to drift. You have to know how to hit zippers for the most part. Drifting in Mario Kart is like a little bit more difficult, but let's face it, that's fucking rubber banding. You know, you're beholden to a fucking computer program, essentially. You don't really have to know how to drift. In this game, you have to. Like, there's no option. There's no option outside of learning how to finesse drifting if you want to get first place at a certain point. You know, there's literally no way. And so you have to develop. You have to, like, get better at the fucking game. And so I did that on, like, what is considered, like, the most difficult level. And I'm like, all right, I have like a much better understanding as to how this works. Why don't we try another level? So I played Texas, you know, and then I played Oregon. And so the last 3 levels of the game were kind of like what taught me how to play the fucking game, because they're, for all intents and purposes, these 3 are the most difficult in the game, but they're the ones that you keep going back to. These ones are the most fun to play because they're like so windy, and I'll get to this later, but they're very, like, concise tracks, you know, and they have, like, a lot of very specific sort of turns and cuts you gotta make, and it's really interesting. Right, okay, I'm good at playing the game, finally. However, I'm not winning. Like, I'm doing the time trials, I'm learning how to do the track, but I'm not, like, winning the time trials, you know? You play 2 ghosts in the time trial. You beat, like, the medium difficulty ghost, and then that unlocks, like, the developer ghost, as it's called. And that's when I really thought, like, I don't think I can play this. I don't think I can beat this game. Because the medium difficulty ghost is like, fucking difficult. I'm like, that's impossible. You know, like, I had just gotten to the point where finishing the tracks was enough for me. I'm like, wow, I can't believe I fucking finished it, you know, in, like, a timely manner. Or rather, I can't believe I beat it, you know. I was still in the Grand Prix thing, like, racing a bunch of bots, and it had taken me, like, so long just to get first place in that. And so suddenly, you know, I'm like top of the fucking world. I'm like, yeah, the fucking bots are no problem for me. I get absolutely smoked by fucking Mickey Mouse Ghost, right? And so I'm like, I don't think, like, I'm driving at my, like, fullest capacity. I don't think I can fucking beat this ghost. And that's when I sort of realized the next evolution of this game, right? Which is that, like, you can't play with the character you're playing with. You know, I feel like anybody who's playing this game casually is probably going to play with the guy, with the green guy that I was playing with. Nobody plays with fucking Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck. That's like the Mario, like, what the fuck is it? The everything character. I'm like, no one plays with that shit. And also, like, no one picking up the game is going to play with one of, like, the really heavy guys who can't turn for shit, but are, you know, really fast. No one's playing with those people initially. You're playing with, like, Dewey, Huey, and Louie, one of the 2 little ducks. You're playing with one of them because they're, like, the quickest, they've got the best turning skills, they're, like, the sharpest handling, like, super responsive. You're playing with one of them. And it'll get you pretty fucking far, you know? It'll eventually get you to, like, having beaten the game, quote unquote. But when it comes to the time trials, what I was finding was that at a certain point, I'm like, I think it's impossible. I think it's actually, like, literally impossible to win the time trials with this character. Like, I love the character, but I think it's impossible to win with him. And so this is where I'm like, okay, well, this game is bullshit. I don't want to fucking play it if I have to fucking, like, if I can't, like, choose the character I want to win the game with, fuck that, right? And so I was like, whatever, I'll just, because it's a fun game, you know, like, what comes to mind immediately is like one of my buddies, how he describes and plays like Melee. You know, sometimes he'll play online, whatever, but I've watched him play. I know how frequently he plays, or at least how frequently he used to play. And he just like flipped it on and he would like kind of like zone out and have fun with it. And it was like a sort of reflexive, fun thing to do, you know? Like, again, like it was like fucking knitting or something, you know? And that's the point I got to with this game without winning, you know, without actually like beating the time trials. Got really good at like finishing maps and cutting corners with this character. And that was it. That was good enough for me. But suddenly I'm like, okay, seriously, how the fuck do I win? And it became very clear to me that there were two characters. There's really two options you have as far as winning goes. You either play with Ludwig, who is like this broken character that you unlock at the end of the game. Like once you beat the game, all the Grand Prix or whatever, you get all the trophies. You unlock this character who is like impossible. I mean, it's impossible. He can't turn. He literally cannot turn. Like the second you start to turn, his speed just drops to nearly zero. But he's like fast as shit, you know, just broken character. And like everyone who like speed runs the game or whatever somehow manages to play with him. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm never going to learn how to do that because it's too difficult. The other option is if you live in fucking Japan, you can unlock the red duck. I don't fucking live in Japan, so I can't unlock the red duck. The only way to unlock the red duck in the States is to fucking plug in Mickey Speedway USA for the Game Boy Color into the fucking Nintendo 64, right? You have to have one of those adapter things. It's fucking bullshit. It's a way to fucking make more money. It's like the OG fucking add-on, right? And you know what, everybody? Yeah, I fucking bought Mickey Speedway USA for the Game Boy Color. Sue me. I bought the add-on, all right? I fucking bought the add-on, and suddenly I'm like, oh, okay. Well, this is how you win the game, right? So I expanded. I started driving with this red duck. And again, I was like, this is impossible. Like the transition from one driver to the next is so fucking ridiculous because the stats are so weird. The stats are so different for every fucking driver. And so going from green duck to red duck, I'm like, I cannot play this fucking game. Like, I can't do this shit. This is so impossible. And again, like, one day I was just on the phone with somebody for like 2 hours. And I just like practiced. And I failed and I practiced. And again, with the fucking red duck, I got to the point where I'm like, I don't even have to think about it anymore. I understand how to like use the controller to drive with him. Now we can begin to actually try beating this time trial. And that's an interesting thing about this game is that, like, to go back to my friend who plays Melee, you like it's like so sensitive. The game is so sensitive to every tiny little thing you do and how you choose to do it. And you really have to get good at like motor reflexes, for lack of a better term. Or no, that's probably like the exact term I'm looking for. You like motor reflexivity. And, you know, the only way like motor reflexes work well is if you're not thinking about them. They have to be functioning beneath the immediate layer of like ordinary consciousness. You can't fucking think about them. The second you start considering like when exactly to take that turn, you fuck up, which obviously happened quite a bit. And so finally, I got to the point where I was able to beat the first ghost, and now it's time to do the second ghost. And again, I'm like struck with the impossibility of the task and how you have to finesse these maps even further. You know, you have to like, oh, I'm sorry, Mo. You have to perfect every move you make. Every single like fraction of the map requires like perfection, requires understanding, like this turn and then the preceding turn, following turn. Like, you have to know exactly what's coming up. You really have to get fucking very, very, very good at these maps. And I already thought I was pretty good at them. And I'm like, Jack, you weren't shit before now. You fucking sucked before now. And whatever, like it took me like so much time to actually beat these ghosts, and I did. And there we go. That's great. Fabulous. I eventually beat all of like the most difficult ghosts on the most difficult tracks. And then I kind of was like, all right, well, that's all there is, you know? Because the most difficult tracks are like super condensed, they're very fun. And then to play like an earlier map, right? Like the Grand Canyon map or something with the REDUX is just so fucking boring because the map is so huge, the turns are so wide, you really can't like, it's not nearly as condensed, right? You can't finesse so easily. It's very boring, essentially. And so I was like, well, there's really no reason for me to replay those. I wish the game had more fun maps. Like, I wish all the maps were as intricate and fun as the last three, but that's fucking life. What can you do about it? And then the final fucking evolution of the game, I'm like, oh my god. These earlier maps are designed to be played with fucking Ludwig. They're designed to be played with like the broken character who can't fucking turn. Suddenly, you know, these massive maps that the turns are so big that you can't even really drift because you eventually just kind of like turn back in on yourself before you have a chance to exit the turn, if that makes sense. The turns are so wide, and the turning radius of the REDUX is like, by comparison, so small that you can't drift. Like, it's impossible to drift. You just have to actually drive the car. That's very boring. Whereas you're playing with the fucking broken character. The radius of his turns is so huge that suddenly all these older, bigger maps that seemed so long and boring, they immediately contract. Like, the second you're playing with that guy, the maps contract, and suddenly you're finessing these massive fucking maps with this one broken character the same way you were finessing these like very intricate, tiny, complex maps with this more dexterous sort of character. And so the game has this interesting back and forth between like the characters you essentially have to play with. And it requires that you get good at playing with like multiple characters if you're going to actually beat the time trials. And again, like, it requires so much patience. It requires a lot of practice. You really have to... Oh my god, I just had weird-ass deja vu. What the fuck? It's so weird when that happens. What was I talking about? Sorry, Mo. You have to practice a lot. And that practice requires, again, for the umpteenth time, just, like, learning the reflexes involved, you know? It's, like, such a... not kinetic, elastic kind of game. Like, it's really weird how it functions. It's not weird, it's cool. It's really a testament to how good the fucking game is, but there's really no gimmicks involved with it, which I like. You know, I think, by comparison, Diddy Kong Racing is like, it's a game entirely composed of gimmicks. So this is the only kart racer that's actually like a racing game. And it's not even a racing game, it's like a more evolved version of what they were trying to do with Diddy Kong Racing. You know, it's the same developer, and in essence, you're chaining together combinations all the same, but rather than using like these fucking zipper pads to win, you really have to know how to play the character. You have to know the controls really well, and so the learning curve in this game is like, it's not even a curve. It's like a straight diagonal. Like, you are just constantly moving up. But man, it's a game that keeps unfolding, and every time I thought, like, damn, what a great game, I guess I should move on, there's really not much more here for me to do, I realized, like, oh wait, no, they thought of this. Like, they thought of you know, going back to all these old maps and like which character you should do it with. And I'm at the point now where I realize that there is no map in this game that is less satisfying than the last three, which seemed like for a while to be the only worthwhile maps in the game. You know, going back and playing with a different character, I'm like, no, they're all this, like, every single map in this game is as satisfying as the next. So there's really like there's no real limit to the amount of enjoyment you can get out of this game.